Hello and welcome to the Happiness Festival, hosted by the Happiness Institute in association with Gowing Life. Today we're joined by Alice Law. Alice is a stress management and performance coach, an international bestseller, co-author of The Law of Brand Attraction, and founder of Lawali Life. She teaches leaders and corporations how to strip away stress and guide them back to balance so they can be calm, charismatic, and successful leaders in all areas of their life and work. And today we'll be talking about stress, the silent killer of our happiness. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Alice, and I'll pass the mic over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Today I'm going to talk about stress being the silent killer of our happiness and my own personal story around it. For me, stress is not merely a biological concept of how our bodies respond or how our minds react, but it's a very real reality that took my own happiness away and changed my father twice in front of me, once mentally, then physically, before taking him completely. Stress killed my father. For me, stress is not merely a biological concept of how our bodies respond and how our minds react, or a phrase to throw around when feeling momentarily overwhelmed. It's actually a very real reality that not only took away my own happiness, but something that changed my father twice, first mentally, then physically in front of me. From being fully submerged in stress as raw reality, I learned and discovered about what I now know and developed what I now believe to be the missing formula to living in a calm state of being. I developed what I now believe allows us to have the strongest base possible for both preventing it and then managing it when needed. Today, I'm going to talk to you a bit about my own story around stress, why it damages our health, the formula I created to prevent and manage it, and then I'll also give you a couple of tools to use from that formula that you can take away yourself. Stress is defined as a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. It can come from experiencing something new or unexpected, something that threatens your feeling of self, or feeling like you have little control over a situation. Stresses, which are the outside events in our life that causes this tension, work, health, financial pressures, divorce, losing a job, the death of a loved one. These are all examples of stresses, and they can come in every dimension of our lives at any time unexpectedly. What I wasn't expecting was for them to be in every dimension of my life at the same time. Growing up for me, stress was never really a part of my life. Apart from the usual teenage growing pains, I had a very fortunate upbringing, wonderful parents, and some amazing experiences. But as I mentioned, we know that stress can come from outside anywhere at any time. And in my early 20s, it came to my life in the mass. My eldest and half sister, Suzanne, was suddenly diagnosed with cancer in my final year of university. It was a true shock and naturally a massive worry for our whole family. But she was a true fighter, someone who was always the life and soul of any room she was in. And we thought she'd won the battle twice until suddenly the cancer won and took her from us 4 years later. Having been in remission one moment, suddenly she was terminal. It was at a time of high stress and naturally devastated our entire family. But my dad in particular suffered from the loss of his eldest daughter. Having lost his own twin sister to cancer in her 40s, the exact same age as my sister was then. During the time of her illness, stress had started to creep into all aspects of our life as a family, and things seemed to go from bad to worse. Financial uncertainty following on from the crisis of 2008 caused my dad to have to sell our home. He'd worked for himself, and the deals he was expecting to happen suddenly fell apart and started to unravel. And he found he was suddenly having to worry about his business, his family's financial future, and his daughter's health at the same time. Combined with the stress of unprecedented legal matters that appeared out of nowhere, my dad was suddenly dealing with loss in finances, loss of his daughter, loss of his home, loss of the people he'd thought as true friends, stress of legal matters, and the loss of a life we once knew. Everything he'd worked so hard to build was slowly evaporating before him, and it was too much for him to bear. Stress took over and it rolled into depression. Stress and depression consumed him, and he started to slow his body down. Having also been rushed to hospital days after my sister's funeral for a blood clot, they also found he had tumours in both his lung and pancreas. I fought hard with him over the coming months, desperate not to lose another family member, but he'd given up mentally and had no intention of going through a grueling treatment again, having also had cancer when I was 3 himself. To him, denial now was the easier option. As time passed, I watched him become more and more consumed by the stress of trying to salvage business, of financial worry, legal matters, and the heartache of grief. And the charismatic, self-assured, mischievous, inspiring person I'd grown up with slowly disappeared in front of our eyes. It was heartbreaking to watch, and I missed him greatly, feeling like I'd already lost the dad I once knew. I watched him suffer in both mind and body until we lost him irreversibly and suddenly to a large stomach ulcer that caused internal complications. I'd been so worried that the cancer would take over one day, but it was stress, the silent killer, that won in the end. It was during this time of great stress, with dealing with everything as a family and my own personal normal stresses of heartache and later redundancy, that I came to the realization that if I didn't learn to deal with stress in a new way, then it would consume me and also take my happiness forever. Having already felt its physical sting on my own health through digestive problems that even led to my own cancer scare, I realized that something had to change, and that with everything going on around me being out of my control, that something had to be me. So I learned and discovered a new way of thinking, being, and coping. And I discovered and developed a formula for living calmly that now allows people to better manage stress when it arises unexpectedly, but most importantly, to build a calm base to live off that prevents the unnecessary effects of it as much as possible. We live in a time where being stressed has become the new normal. Constantly hearing people around us say how busy or how stressed they are, it's like a badge of honor. And where a bit of stress and pressure can be good and cause us to perform better and motivate us, we call this eustress, the kind that we get when we're talking in front of a big crowd or about to run a marathon. It puts us to perform a little bit better and motivates us. But the problem occurs when we are constantly experiencing it, feeling it, chronic stress, the build-up over time, and that debilitates us. The continual stress is what we call distress, and our inability to manage it is the silent killer. It's the killer of our relationships, of our productivity. We're actually 31% more productive when we're working from a happy and calm headspace instead of a stressed one. It's the killer of our mental ability to deal with problems effectively. It affects our memory. It's the killer of romance from its ability to kill our sex drive and make us irritable. It's the killer of our energy, our sleep, our happiness, and eventually, like my wonderful dad, even our physical health. Calm is needed, and my story of stress is one of millions because the statistics on stress today are truly mind-blowing. In the UK alone last year, 74% of people said they felt so overwhelmed and stressed at one point that they felt unable to cope. In the US, around 70 to 90% of all doctors' appointments are somehow related to stress. And 51% of people who were stressed reported feeling depressed. 61% reported feeling anxious, as long-term stress has the ability to roll and turn into depression or anxiety. And for the first time ever, in 2018 to 2019, stress was the number one reason for the most days of work-related health illness absence, overtaking musculoskeletal disorders for the first time, and accounted for 12.8 million of all days taken in the UK alone. Figures are increasing every year. It essentially stresses the mental pandemic of the 21st century. But with outside stresses never going away, it's truly down to how we deal with it, but also to how we prevent it from taking over, responding instead of reacting, which determines how we live our lives. In the same way that we're all born happy, we're also all born calm. No baby's first words or sentences are ever, "I'm just so stressed." Calmness and happiness are our natural states, ingrained into our cores. But what happens is we learn to be stressed over time. What can bring us great happiness also has the ability to bring us great stress through its lack, change, or loss. You know, the great relationship you have that ends in a breakup, or the home that you feel secure in that you then have to move from and sell, a marriage to a divorce, health to health problems. All these things have the ability to make us happy and also cause us great stress. And chronic stress, long continual stress, is the silent killer of our happiness and beyond, wearing down our minds and bodies. Why it does this is because the fight or flight stress response, which is the body's natural response to stress, which is the sympathetic nervous system, is aimed to keep us safe. It's the response that automatically goes off when your body believes you're under threat. When the response is triggered, our body is stimulated to produce a flash of stress hormones like cortisol that boosts the body's alertness and heart rate, sending extra blood to the muscles, concentrating on things it thinks it needs to keep you safe and survive, like sending blood away from digestion to your muscles, because why would you need to digest your meal if you were running away from a lion in caveman times? If our stress response is constantly being activated repeatedly, then the effects can result in wear and tear of the body, such as headaches, heart problems, stomach ulcers, digestive problems, sleep problems, weight problems, and more. And the pressure can make us feel mentally overwhelmed, unable to cope, damage our ability to make clear decisions, make us irritable, even affect our memory, and cause depression or anxiety. The real catch is that we can also automatically stimulate our body's stress response by imaginary threats in the exact way we do when we experience them in reality. So worrying and envisioning something that is stressful to you triggers the exact same response in your body to what it would if it were really happening, with perceived mental and psychological threats being able to turn the stress response on, whether imagined or real. In this modern day age where life is complicated, fast-paced, and everyone is expected to always be available, worrying about deadlines and what they need to do, that alone can cause a build-up of stress if not dealt with. If we don't learn to live in a state of calm and to prevent stress as much as cure it, then the repercussions can be life-altering in both mind and body. Calmness is a skill, I believe. If it wasn't, then the whole world would be calm, and the reality is it's far from it. But I believe that it's our natural skill that we need to only relearn and remember. From this experience of stress, I came to know that preventing it as much as possible and managing it as greatly as possible is a two-part process. One of calming and getting to know your mind, and of connecting and understanding your soul, your core self. It is essentially the synergy between mind and soul, through the development of mental flexibility and of spiritual connection. This is because you can have as calm a mind as you like, but if your soul is stressed because you're not living true to your own values, integrity and purpose, and what really gives you joy, then you'll struggle to find true inner calm because you'll be going against what your very core is guiding you to. But just as you can have a connection and an intuitive dialogue with your soul, your inner self, but if you cannot quiet your mind, allow that voice to come through, or you don't know your triggers inside out and yourself and what gives you negative thought patterns, then you will allow that voice to take over and always make poor decisions based on stress and fear when it arises. Learning to access calmness on both the logical basis and an energetic spiritual basis comes from a formula I've named triple PI. It's perspective, presence, purpose, and intuition. Perspective, if you can master your mind by really getting to know it, you'll be able to shift your perspective not just on the outside stressor itself, but on your response to it. Presence, if you can log into presence as much as possible, living in that space between reaction and response, and engage in the life around you, you'll be better able to choose how you respond to stress instead of reacting in the moment. And purpose, if you can connect your core identity and understand what soul purpose you have to live out, you will live it whilst living true to your values. Intuition, finally, is if you can learn the difference between the voice in your head and the voice in your heart. The guidance of your gut and the voice of your intuition will move you in the right direction, and you will feel more calm. Being conscious of these four things and developing them will give you the key to calmness, and you'll be able to unlock and rely on that strength whenever you need, and most importantly, choose to. Today, I'll talk to you about 2 exercises to take away that can help you put that into a calm space of synergy with mind and soul, and will help prevent you going into a continually stressed one. In my triple PI formula, perspective and presence are for working with the mind, and purpose and intuition are for connecting with the soul. The mind, today I'll give you an exercise for perspective. So reframing your perspective on your own self-talk is so important when it comes to stress. Shifting our perspective on ourselves within our own self-talk. When stressed, we can speak to ourselves so badly, and we can do that anyway. But the only conversation you will have from the start of your life to the end of your life is the one you have with yourself. It is essentially the most important conversation you will ever have, because emotionally, you cannot tell the difference when you're talking to yourself and saying something damaging, to whether I'm saying something horrible to you now or someone you love is. The damage on our emotions is still the same, on our self-worth, our self-esteem. So the how we talk to ourselves really is so, so important. And this is a quick technique to pattern interrupt your negative self-talk. It's called the cancel technique. And it's a quick technique for the mind to cancel that negative thought and give yourself the space to reframe it and say something kinder and more positive to yourself. When you realize you're being unkind or you're going down a negative thought spiral internally, simply state in your mind or out loud, cancel twice, cancelling once with your conscious mind, once with your unconscious mind, and then choose again. The more you practice this, the easier it gets. Like anything with the brain and neuroplasticity, the pathway you practice the most becomes the stronger and then becomes the automatic route for the mind. So trying that every day will really help put you in a good stead with your mind. Then another exercise for the soul, I'll teach you about something to do with intuition today. So connecting to your soul, your consciousness of your soul, and the natural calmness available within. When we're connected to this, we do feel naturally calm. We feel an inner peace and understanding. We feel a trusting, even when things might not be going right. You feel more intuitive. You can act on gut feelings, strong feelings about people or situations. You're tuned into your higher purpose or goals in life, and you're less likely to get caught up in the little things that make you cross. You're essentially spiritually open and healthy. So something to start this process is tapping into your soul energy, and intuition is all about stillness. This simple breathing exercise is how you can activate your life force energy, which in Japanese we call ki, Chinese we call qi, but it's essentially the energy that runs through all of our systems. A simple exercise to activate this is through our breath. So literally breathe in for the count of 4, then hold for 4, and then breathe out for 8. And just repeat this 3 times or until you feel calm. And you'll notice your energy in your body will start to calm down and feel more still. And you can add to this practice as well, if you like, by doing this before the start of meditation. So sitting with yourself after you've done this breath exercise in meditation, and then setting an intention to connect to your soul. So focus goes where energy flows, and setting an intention is a really powerful process for your mind. So if you set the intention after you've done that breathing exercise, sit comfortably in your meditative position, feet on the floor, palms facing upwards, close your eyes, and then just repeat in your mind or out loud, like, I set the intention to connect to my higher self in this meditation now. Please guide me and tell me what I need to know. And you can either say about a certain situation, or you can just say in general. And sit still in meditation, breathing deeply for 5 minutes or more. The guidance you're looking for may come to you during a feeling of the meditation or a calm thought that just randomly pops into your head, or it may be something that comes to you later after the meditation itself. But it will be a calm voice, a knowing voice, not the confused voice in your head that's really loud. So opening up your soul's dialogue is really, really important for learning to be calm, because it's its natural state. Learning to calm your mind and tap into the natural calmness of your soul is arguably one of the greatest strengths there is. It will prime you to being the calm and charismatic leader of all areas of your life and work. Great decisions and creativity and great relationships and connection are all born from a calm space of serenity, because they're the choices and ideas, relationships we make that come from an assured knowing within. When you let the outside stress in your life build up, the stress in your mind and tensions in your body take over, then you're not only putting your health and happiness at risk, but also your ability to execute with excellence the personal and professional decisions that matter most to you in your life. Calmness is, to me, the definitive skill that will help you to make a large impact and a sustainable impact in the world you will be able to keep going with, bringing out the very best of yourself and your efforts. The question you have to ask yourself is, are you the calmest person you know? And if not, don't you want to be? Outside stress will always keep happening. That's really simply life, but it's up to you to decide how you want to answer to it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that, Alice. That was, very inspiring, and I'm sure I've definitely taken something away from that, and I'm sure many people will. So we'll get stuck into the questions. My first one, many of us are so time poor in our lives at the moment. What is a minimum you think people should start out with who have just listened to this? You know, if they've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the start of the day, what do you suggest for them?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly believe that you can change yourself within 10 minutes of your day, and even 5 minutes of meditation will shift your energy for the day. 10 minutes will help rewire your brain, 20 minutes will change your life, I always say. So just starting with 5 minutes is such an easy thing to do. And if I will say, like, that breathing exercise, doing that for 5 minutes a day will really shift things if you're time poor, or just starting with 10 minutes of meditation combined with gratitude to open up that perspective in your mind as well. So thinking of 5 things you're grateful for at the start of the day and meditating, that's a simple thing.
Yeah, I think everyone's got at least 5 minutes to give to such an important task like that. And the techniques that you've touched on, you know, the cancel technique, the meditation, it sounds like a real mix of, like, you know, different strategies, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're essentially reprogramming your brain to think more positively about yourself and about your day. You know, meditation, mindfulness. Are these all things that you have gathered in your personal life? Or did you make a conscious effort to be like, oh, let's look for the best practices and see what's good out there?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, to be honest. So when I started putting this all together, it was what brought me through the time I spoke about earlier. And then I suddenly realized that I wanted to learn about every single aspect. So the logical, the spiritual, the energetic, everything. I do Reiki healing and stuff as well. And I put them all together from using them myself. And then now I've just developed them more from, you know, being with clients and things to what really suits certain people better, because we are all different. But that's what I like, this sort of, you can have logic, but you have to have the spiritual side as well to really feel as calm as possible.
And do you usually work with people on a one-to-one basis, or is it a group session?
So I have been working one-to-one with people and in corporates, but actually now, because of the pandemic and everything's happened, I've decided that I will be launching at the end of June a sort of, it's essentially an online membership subscription, so a group thing that's low cost for people, because I just think stress is only rising and I want it to be accessible for all and something people can just use when they need to.
And yeah, you mentioned obviously the current situation. How has your work sort of evolved to fit that?
Yeah, I mean, everything's online, as we know now. We're not speaking obviously in front of people in life, but I think it's all I've seen really is that people's stress levels have risen, and anxiety is a huge thing that's risen. And I just think it's such an important time for people to really check in and realize what stage their mental health is currently at and what they can do to prevent it from getting hold of them too badly. Because it really is, as I said, I'm such a huge advocate of prevent as much as cure. And yeah, I've seen such a rise. I think that's really the time for us to start working on that basis to prevent as well as cure.
And we each have stress in our lives, but when can we recognize stress manifesting itself in a negative way in our lives? When does it reach a point where an individual should reach out for something else to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's like you say, we all have stress in our lives, and you have that moment of stress where you feel suddenly stressed, and that can be normal, and then it might pass. But the signs to recognize are when you are feeling really low in energy, when you're feeling anxious a lot more than usual, because anxiety is actually a symptom of stress, you know, prolonged stress, like depression can be. I'm not saying all depression is, but it is partly also can be to do with stress. So anxiety, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety continually, you know, multiple times a week, that's something to really look at. Looking at digestive problems really is something that, you know, I've experienced that myself. A lot of my friends have. If, you know, IBS, all these things can really be a reaction to how stressed you are. So yeah, listening to your body as much as your mind, and just seeing if you are someone who's reacting a lot to things, if little things are winding you up, or you're feeling overwhelmed and under a lot of pressure, that's also something to just look at. Well, to be aware of, and then think, okay, maybe I need to deal with that.
Sure. I think I'm probably guilty of this, but I imagine a lot of people who have dealt with stress throughout their lives just consider it part of themselves. And, you know, I've always had it. It's too late for me to turn it around. What do you say to them?
I say, like, truly, we're not meant to be stressed. Like I said, we're all born calm. It's just that the way society has run and been so busy that we all think, like you say, it's such a normal part of life. It's just bound to happen. But it really, you can change your state so easily in terms of just putting 5 minutes of practice in a day at the beginning of the evening, or doing something a bit more in depth, to shifting into a calm person. And you really want to become that person who can respond instead of react. No one wants to be that person who just flies off the handle when something bad comes up, and be able to like really sit with yourself and decide what the best course of action is, whether it's with a work problem or a relationship problem or just something in life. And I think that people need to realize how much better you feel when you're working from a state of calm motivation than when you're working from a state of stressed, panicked motivation.
Yeah, I think it impacts so many areas of our life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And for those that want to implement your ideas into their own lives, but they're still finding that their stress levels are very high, at what point do you recommend they seek out, a specialist like yourself or a therapist?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. If you're someone, I think, who wants, who needs extra support, who wants to have that sort of, I mean, I'd say it's like, having a coach or having a specialist in something. Sometimes it's almost like a treat to yourself, because it's a space for your own self. It's like that thing you can do for yourself that no one else is involved in. And it actually just gives you a sense of well-being as well. But I think if you're someone who is just really struggling and it's actually seeping into all areas of your life, then you really should consider it. Because if it's affecting your relationships because you're irritable, or if it's affecting your work because you're not actually concentrating as well as you can do, even though you think you are, or if you're just feeling an immense amount of pressure, tired, all these things, I really would urge people to actually think about who they can see for it.
So you mentioned that stress can affect lots of people in lots of different ways. Why is that? What is the reason that people are affected differently with different levels of stress?
It comes down to it's, the same way it can also be affects people with different DNA in different ways. But in terms of like environmental and social aspects, it's always relative to your own perspective. So, for example, I had someone on my podcast the other day who's an amazing guy, and he was saying how he had a dad who was always constantly ill since he was young. So going to hospital for him, he didn't find a stressful experience because he'd grown up with it. Whereas someone who's never had a parent or child in hospital, and suddenly that gets thrown into them, they'll find that a really high stressful thing. So it really does come down to what you've been used to and what does trigger you individually because of your circumstances or experiences in life. So it is different for everyone, but the techniques can be the same for everyone, if that makes sense.
And to sort of focus on the individual, stress comes in many different degrees. For instance, the stress I experience in a busy rush hour, or if I've missed the bus, is hugely different from the stress if someone hears that a family member is diagnosed with a chronic disease. Are there different ways of treating the different degrees of stress?
Well, it's really dependent on, so say like that moment, like you say, when you're rushing for the bus and you're feeling a bit stressed, those can be really easily calmed down from breathing and taking a pause afterwards, or telling your body it's safe by doing, there's something called the shakedown, which is why it's called the zebra shakedown, because there's a book called Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, because it's all about stress. But essentially when running away from a threat, a zebra then shakes. So doing something like a shake that tells your body it's safe are very quick, simple techniques for stuff like that might immediately cause you stress in the rush hour. Whereas when you're going through continual stress, it's really about taking the time every day to do something for your mind, to do something for your soul, to do something for your body, just to make sure that you're not getting lost in the stress. Because like you said, it's the difference between chronic stress and acute stress. Basically, the acute stress can come up out of nowhere on the bus or wherever, and the chronic stress is continual over time. But the problem is, as well, is that people don't realize is that acute stress, so those little moments of stress, build up and can turn into chronic stress. So you really have to sort of be aware of how much it's happening to you, even if you don't feel like something huge is going on in your life at the time.
And your work, and there's lots of other sort of apps, things like Headspace, Calm, Sam Harris's Waking Up app, all these mindfulness apps and guides. Do you think they're reaching they're sort of scalable to reach as much of the population as possible, and how effective are they in actually dealing with stress on, a nationwide or global scale?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because they are low cost and it can reach anyone with an iPhone or a smartphone can be reached by it. And it's great for, meditation. I truly am the biggest advocate of. It's got the ability to change your brain, to really stop essentially that connection with what we call our me center, which is the one where you worry all the time. It's been proven that meditation actually disconnects that and allows you to connect to a calmer connection with yourself. So, meditation is truly amazing. But for me, I use it as part of the package because I think there's other things that we have to do in terms of self-awareness, like understanding what actually triggers us, understanding our own energy, listening to our soul and stuff, which people tend not to do. And it takes a whole practice in itself. So I think meditation is a really important part, but I think it's a part of it, if that makes sense.
So now a couple of final questions that we ask all of our speakers, and slightly different to the previous ones. If you had sort of unlimited funds and resources, what research would you fund to increase global happiness?
I would do research around energy healing and stress. For me, I do Reiki myself and have done sort of energy clearings and healings. And I think that energetic intelligence is a really underrated thing because we are all made up of energy. Science has proven that. So I think I'd put as much much funding and energy as possible into researching how Reiki can really heal us from, the physical symptoms of grief. It definitely has with me, like those feelings of pressure in your chest is incredible. And also, I've had a friend who, same thing with IBS. So I think energy healing and actually scientifically proving that it works would be something that I would look at for sure.
And finally, what does happiness mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think happiness means to me just feeling like I'm truly in a sense of calm myself. And also happiness to me, it's a sense of self, because I do believe we're all born happy and all born calm. So it's really about feeling like you should do naturally, effortlessly.
Perfect. And where can everyone find out more about yourself and your work?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is www.lawali.life.com, or -life, which is LAWALI-life. And then I'm also on Instagram under the same thing and on LinkedIn. But yeah, that's where everything is. So you can find out more there.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. I hope people get something out of it, especially at this time, because stress levels are only rising, as we know. So
I completely agree. Well, thank you so much.